to the channel, guys. Today we are working on a axle out of this beautiful Teal Cobra. The owner will remain unnamed, but it's been to a couple different shops with a axle issue, and it just makes noise. Something was binding, popping, and they had some creaking once they finally did this most recent rendition. But he's had quite a bit of money invested in trying to chase down a problem, and he actually found what he thought was going to be the source of the issues, which you guys can kind of see. This is cracked from here to here, and then on the inside it's cracked identically. So we already have this all cleaned up for the most part, and we're gonna weld in this. We're actually gonna try to squeeze the two frame rails together, and then weld this up. And then we'll probably end up putting a plate in any appropriate flat location. And then we have to re-weld these to the floor because that's coming off. And then we have to fill the crack on the inside. Same thing we're gonna do on the outside. Plate it and make it look nice. Then we'll paint it all black and you'll never see it again. So it'll be nice and strong. Now we're moving on to the second half of the project. As I was inspecting this car and kind of doing a walk around on it, I took a step back and looked at it. And maybe you guys will be able to see pretty clearly. If you can't see it from that angle, I got another one for you that you will for sure see it on. Oh, but you can definitely tell that that rear end looks like a banana right there. It is completely tweaked. Yeah, you can see that. If you see, so it's up. So this is the top side, this is the bottom side underneath the car, and both of the outsides are going upwards like this. Pretty bad. In fact, when I had it in the car, I had like 2.2 degrees on one side and like I think it was like 2 flat on the other of upward. So there's really 4 degrees of difference between these outside ends. And that might not seem like a lot, but 2 degrees over the span of what, 2 feet, 2.5 feet? I mean, this has probably moved almost 3/4 of an inch out from where it is in the center. So it's kind of crazy. So we found that, and now let's see if you can see this, because this is kind of cool. But if I look in this hole straight, the other side is the opposite axle seal. How nuts is that? That's how crooked it is. That should be straight through. So amidst taking this rear end apart, we also found a few other issues, one of which is the cage on one of the differential bearings. It looks like the differential was dropped at one point, so the cage is kind of smashed in. Also, the axles are a hair too long. Now that might be caused by the bend in the housing, so we're not going to modify them at all until we fix the housing. Once we straighten the housing and the jig and weld up the axle tubes, then we will obviously rebuild all this stuff. And if we have the same issue, then we will address it. But what the issue was is that the axles were going too far in, and then when you put the slide pin that goes in the center of the differential right here, which if you've worked on these before, this is what locks the axles in place. There's 2 C-clips that go on there, and then you pull the axles outward. And they should have some clearance in between the axle and this big hardened steel pin that goes in the center. These ones had 0. In fact, it was tapped in with a hammer, putting outward pressure on the axles, and that also meant that the axles were rubbing against that cross pin. Now, when the axles are rotating at different speeds and rubbing against that cross pin, that's going to create noise, heat, and probably lead to a lot of the problems that he's been trying to solve in the last few weeks. So that was one problem. The axle tubes is 2 problems. The floor is 3 problems. We're pretty confident that it's going to be much better the second time out. First time for us, though. Let's not get confused. We have not touched this vehicle in the past. This is our first go at it. Hopefully it's rock steady when it's all done. So we already got the axle out. I have it brake cleaned the majority of the way. It's ready to go. We're going to go move it over to Matt's side, start cleaning up the axle tubes, and put the jig in it to see how crooked it is. So let's move over there. All right, guys, I'm over on the Wisconsin race car side. We have the axle out and stripped down. She is, man. You can just see that. So, you got the jig getting set up. Use an 1.5 inch bar. And we're about to see how far off on both sides this thing is right now. So the bar does not come all the way through straight. That's how far off center is.
Almost bottomed out on this side too.
That's how bad it is. By the way, for all y'all watching and auditing our YouTube channel, we do not own the rights to this music. Yeah, it's pretty jacked up. It's gotta come down like an inch on either side. All right, guys, making progress on the Teal Cobra rear end. We got the axle tubes nice and straight. Jig fitted perfectly. What a difference. And I just set up the backlash on the ring gear. Pinion bearing preload is right to spec, so I'm not really worried about it. It's pretty good, and I know he just replaced it all, so now that it cleaned up nice, I like it. The backlash we set at 12. It's got a good amount of carrier bearing preload, so I'm happy with all that. So I'm happy with how it's all going together. So we're pretty much set up in the center here. Now I got to put new wheel bearings and seals in it and address the next problem, which was the axles were hitting that center pin in the center here. I don't know if we showed you guys that, but if we didn't, I will show you here shortly once I get the axle seals and bearings in. But that cross shaft was binding on the axles, probably creating the majority of the noise in this thing, aside from the bent axle tubes, which did not help that situation whatsoever. So far so good. I'm gonna throw some lube into these bearings here while it's sitting here and I'm still working on it, and then hammer the bearings and stuff in the side. All right, guys. Ooh. Should I go like this? No. All right, guys, so we're working on the Teal Fox. Bringing you another update. I guess you know, some might call us self-proclaimed Mustang specialists, but there's reasons why. So check out what we found on this Teal Cobra. Now it had a bunch of noise, it had axle issues, and the axle issues were causing a bunch of noise, so we're just slowly checking off a list of a bunch of problems. You guys have seen all the other ones earlier in the video. Now we are finding some more. So this has a set of aftermarket control arms. I'm not sure whose they are. They're nothing crazy, standard. But if you have a Mustang and you're going to put upper and lower control arms in it, which is a very good upgrade, even solids like this is the most cost-effective way. They are likely going to come with larger bolt holes, and the hardware should include half-inch hardware. But if it doesn't, you want to check, because look at this is a factory bolt. It's not the factory bolt itself, but it's a factory size bolt, and which is a 12 millimeter. And that's how much play it has in the bushings. Now that's going to cause noise, obviously, when it's in there. It'll cause it to chatter. It'll cause it to hammer threads like this one because it was moving. I don't know if you guys can see. It's probably not going to show you. But the threads are hammered smooth here from chattering in the axle. So that causes a problem. So then what you have to do is when you have these aftermarket control arms, you have to drill the body. So let's walk over to the car. We got the exhaust off now in order to do this process. So we have to drill these upper holes, upper control arm mounts to 1 inch, 1 inch. I'm sorry, half inch. We gotta drill these lowers to half inch. Oh, there's something in here. Oh, look at the size of that thing. That's probably another noise. It's a good sized rock. So we gotta drill those to half inch, drill these. We have to drill the lower axle pockets. And then we have to check, because it's got aftermarket upper bushings, so we gotta make sure that these are half inch as well, which they look like they are. So we gotta make sure we verify that. Otherwise, that would be the only time that sometimes you would keep the 12 millimeter hardware, as a lot of times these upper control arms do have a 12 millimeter bolt for that part only, just so you don't need to press the bushings out. Now you might say, now why does this matter? You can just tighten the shit out of it. First of all, I don't care how strong you are, you ain't tighten it strong enough to stop that axle from moving. It's eventually gonna make noise, it's gonna loosen up, it's gonna chatter, especially when you have rear axle issues like this car did. You also wanna pay close attention for this. So we have, let's move upgrade. Let's move away from the 12 mil. My bench is a mess, even though I just cleaned it. There it is. Okay, so now we have the half inch bolt. Fits in the control arm. Fits in the control arm. A little bit of movement. Fits here, which this is not good. This means that we have to ensure that it fits in here, otherwise this project is going to get more difficult. Please fit. Doesn't fit. That's an issue. So now we got to drill this out to 1/2 inch. That sucks. We'll see how that goes. Back to this. So, fits, fits, fits. All this was great. Now I noticed this one. You could probably see it already. Look at the size of that one. What kind of crap is that? So luckily I have a sleeve out of another control arm laying around. I'm going to clean it up, grease it up, and drill the center out to 1/2 inch, just like I have to do on the top of that housing. But we're not going to have any noise issues with this one, with all this time. So even parts brand new out of the box, used from somebody down the street. Even if you know the history on them, you always want to look at them, because this is the type of stuff you'll find. You'll install brand new control arms, and now all of a sudden you have a rattle issue when you're driving it. This could be a potential cause. So I'm gonna go to the hardware store. I gotta get all new hardware for this. I have to get a new 1/2 inch drill bit, because I know I'm gonna trash it by doing this project. And come back, drill some holes, and hopefully reinstall this thing. We have successfully drilled all the control arms to 1/2 inch bolts. All the body mounts are drilled to 1/2 inch bolts. So we're gonna put the control arms back in the car and get ready to put the axle on. So we are finishing up the Teal Cobra. I'll bring you guys an update and drive video in the morning. But for now, we have everything drilled. We have all the grade A bolts installed. Everything needs to be tight. I actually want to set it on its ride height to tighten all the suspension components. Then we'll put the exhaust in. So we drill all the bolts to 1/2 inch. Everything is lubricated, so hopefully nothing squeaks. But all that's left is letting the RTV dry overnight and then filling this thing with fluid tomorrow. Then we'll drive it in the morning and hopefully get a clean bill of health. Speaking of Cobras and morning, here is the next one that just got dropped off for more rear end work. But show you guys a little sneak peek. There'll be a lot of video on this one. This was been to a couple other shops in the area, but it's actually a 99 Cobra. It's got a Vortec on it and some motor work. It's got a Viper Spec T56. It's got a cage in it. It has an 0304 IRS in it, and that's what it's here for. It's got severe wheel hop issues, so we are going to get this one going. Subscribe to see this one in the future videos. So let's fast forward now and get to finishing this Teal car and taking it around the block. All right, she's on the ground. We are gonna go take this beauty, turn some heads. Should probably put a hat on or something. Anyway, we're gonna go take this beauty around the block, we'll turn some heads, see how she dries, make sure everything is mint. We'll do some crazy eights and stuff to make sure the rear end is settled in. Right now it's sitting really high because we just obviously dropped it down on it. So we gotta go make sure that everything sits and rides nice. But fingers crossed that this solves all the problems that he's been having with it. Let's go test it out.
Alright guys, we are on the test drive with the Teal Cobra. I'm gonna roll up this window. It's a little long like that. So we're on a test drive with the Teal Cobra. It drives awesome. It's a pretty much completely stock 93 Cobra. It's got lowering springs on it. Has some older aftermarket shocks. And it has some driveline upgrades, only because they were trying to figure out what the problem was with all the noise in the back. So it has control arms, as you guys saw earlier in the video. It has like a billet yoke flange, which is probably unneeded, but it's on there. But now we're driving it. We put about 25 miles on it already. Drives awesome. It's got some loose trim panels, and since it has no back seat,
Got to hear everything.
yeah, kind of makes a lot of noise. Fuel pump's loud. You hear a lot of road noise. But other than that, it drives really good. I don't think there's any major issues here. I think the wheels and tires need to be balanced, but pretty successful so far. The only thing we've noticed is that the mount, so I had an aftermarket catback. You guys probably saw us installing it. It's not factory at all, and it was hitting the frame rail on the passenger side. So I kind of tweaked it over like a 1/2 inch, and now I think it's hitting the drive shaft over heavy bumps. So we're gonna get that back to the shop, double check that, and if need be, move it back over so it vibrates on the frame rail. Rather have that than the pinion flange chewing through it. He's planning on putting a different cap back on it, so it's not really a huge issue anyway. But it's kind of cool driving around in a Teal 93 Cobra. We've gotten multiple thumbs up already. Everybody seems to like it a lot. It'd be really cool with like an on-3 turbo kit or nicer, but you know, turbo nonetheless.
Some little pep. Give her a little pep.
A little more exhaust would be nice too. You can literally not hear anything. It's like driving a Prius. And for the sound, the sound deadening technology they had in '93, that means the car's really quiet. Very much sound deadening on these things. But sunroof car, taking a beautiful ride out in the country. Odometer says that's 68,000 miles. Those two gauges aren't working currently. Trans shift's really good. Clutch feels good. Brakes are a little soft, so we already bled the rears. We're probably gonna bleed the fronts just because.
Cover the bases.
Yeah. But we'll do a walk around on what the car looks like when we get back to the shop, and we'll see you guys there. Look at that beauty. Such a cool color.